Sorry, I need to switch. It's like, okay, so let's talk about unit 9. Right, we're more than halfway. Congratulations. It's gonna come up real soon. So for this week, we're gonna talk about incident response and we're gonna work on malware analysis, right? I think it would be fun to kind of take a look at real malware that's coming in from the network and knowing how to be able to detect it. I did a little bit of it in my forensic class. I'm gonna show you how you can use Wireshark and Network Miner today. Okay, so at the beginning of the notes, it goes over the differences between a security event, which is what we normally see in event viewer, like in Windows system, compared to a security incident, right? So an incident is really a violation. For example, if someone is breaching your network, that's an incident. If someone is doing data leak, that's an incident. If malware is downloaded via phishing channel, that's an incident. But the security event is just occurrences that would pertain to security. That could be related, positive or negatively, with security function. So now the adverse event is any event that has negative consequences. So when you're looking at something that has negative impact, that becomes an adverse event. So in the first question, it asks you to identify the type of security events or security incidents. Okay. So for question 1A, it says a user is locked out of his system after attempting multiple incorrect passwords, right? This person just simply have failed logged in. That is a security event. So I forgot my password because I came back from vacation and I'm not able to log into the network. That is considered a security event. A user downloaded a malware, right? Malware would have negative impact. That is an adverse event. Now, if the malware is spreading or it's corrupting the system, then it becomes a, yes, thank you, security incident, good job. So adverse event is when the user downloaded the malware.
So an event is like inconvenience.
An event could also be a positive event, right? Your system track all events, okay? But a security event, usually the connotation behind it is something that's negative. So if I'm locked out of my computer, it's a security event. If I'm attempting to install application, but I don't have privilege, it's a security event, right? But then if I override that, like because the rule said that I can't install application and I try to override it, I try to modify, add myself to another group so I can become more of a super user, then it becomes a security incident, okay? A violation or something that's imminent to cause a negative impact on the system. For D, a document contains customer personal identifiable information, the PII, was accidentally sent to the vendor. And this is a mistake, so it becomes a security incident. People send the wrong attachment or type in the wrong email sometimes. An attacker performed escalation of privilege to access encrypted data. It's a security incident. Because we broke the rule on that, right? So when you go through these, you have to ask yourself, is this breaking the rule? Sometimes you do have like a blur between the two. Now, it depends on the company's policy here, right? So security incident. For F, an attacker is using network sniffer to detect packets on the wireless network. It is a security event.
Not incident?
No. Why not? Why not? Yeah, so if there's if it's sniffing is not completely illegal, right? Sniffing is not against policy. We use the same thing for monitoring. So to detect packets on the wireless network, it's simply if it's a public network, they can sniff. But if they're using the packets to cause malicious actions, then it becomes a security incident, right? But then also, it comes back to the company. If the company prevent all scanning period, right? Then we have to have measures to be able to do that. So some of the activities for each of the phase in security incident response. So when you're responding to incidents, so this is what you normally see with the security specialist job. This is very common, right? So the first phase is called preparation. This is when you would put together hardware, software, or information that would be needed for investigation of the incident. So sometime that would be forensic related. Sometime that would also be interviewing people, right? So you would need to prepare and plan for what kind of investigation. So responding to an incident is a reactive type of approach. So that means that it already happened and you're going back to see what happened, how it happened, and why it happened. Then sometimes you are responding to incident as it occurs, right? Like the company is being attacked currently. Like denial of service attack is happening on one of your servers. So that means for the detection analysis, we would then identify that security incident is taking place. So we just need to make sure that we looked at maybe logs to identify that the incident occurred. Or if you are looking at the network that's being attacked, we might be looking at monitoring systems that's telling us, or maybe intrusion prevention system notifications and logs, or firewall logs. So detections and analysis is in the second phase. This is where you find out what type of incident it is. And then we would have containment, eradication, and recovery. So that is sequentially happening. So sometimes you can contain, most of the time we will try to contain. The majority of the time you might not be able to eradicate. That means you cannot remove things completely, right? You can only stop it from spreading. That means containment. But eradication means that we would extract it completely. And then recovery. So whether you are going through containment or eradication, you still have to recover. It could be your data, it could be your system performance. It could be operation, right, with people. So that would be passive activities that would design to uncover. So you would then need to obtain more information about the incident so that way you can take effective measures. So if, let's say that I am being attacked with denial of service, right? What the containment of it is, so the prior stages, we would then go to our web application firewall or firewall to look at the logs to see that that's what's happening, right? Or our network monitoring system. The next step to contain it is to customize your firewall rule to be able to block it, right? So it stops happening or it reduces the attack surface. And then if you're seeing that they're capitalized on a certain vulnerability, then you have to fix that problem as it happens. So we have to really look, and sometimes you might have multiple incidents happening at once, right? You have to prioritize those incidents based on the critical level. So you have to wait on, how important that is, that system or that user account or whatever it is that's being jeopardized compared to other incidents that are happening. So the easiest way is to we look at the quantity measurement of the file, right? Data always tells us how valuable that is to the critical operation of the company. So after you contain it or you stop it from spreading or you remove it, eradicate, like in the malware example, a lot of the time malware now we can only contain, right? We can only stop it from spreading to other segment of the network. And then we can't really remove the malware completely. We just make it inactive so that way it's not malicious to our system. Then we have to recover. So if your data is corrupted, you have to pull your backup, restore from your backup, and then, go back to your normal business. Post-incident activities, we just need to make a report. We document what lesson has been learned through the process and what can we improve in the future. And this is always required. It's always good to keep notes and keep track of things as you go through incidents because you have to put that into the documentation. Now, some system would have this mechanism already built in. And sometimes you wouldn't have to do it manually. Okay. So any question before I'm gonna flip back to the notes a little bit. And you can find this information on the notes. I sometimes summarize it a little bit so it's easier to put down as the answer. So computer security incident response team. Normally, your team would consist of different type of people, management for decision making, a lot of the technical people and also business people. It really depends on the type of business and then, so what you would see now every time to build out the team, you got to make sure everybody's contact is available, how you can communicate without having a smartphones or email, right? So here are the faces. We just went over that. So if you refer to NIST documentation 861, it's going to give you the categories of indicators. So incidents, normally how you can detect it is through alert, through logs, through public knowledge or information, technical information that's available. As you know that malware is about 60% defined or recognized. So having additional community support in providing additional information, like you can submit it to VirusTotal, and then if it's able to find something, it's going to give it to you. But if it's unknown, it's questionable, right? We still have to contain it. And then also refer to internal people. As an analyst, these are the activities. So you want to profile your network and system characteristics. This is going to help you identify what's normal and what's not normal. Then in addition to that, you also need to understand, right, all your system requirements, your network operations, and your applications. That's going to give you an understanding of your baseline. Then you want to have logging policy. The fall down is this. We have tons and tons of logs, and logs can be very granular to go through. Some company, they have problem retrieving the old logs because the old log is overwritten by new entries. So you got to make sure that you set the rules on how long you're going to retain your logs and how much, because it's money, right? Okay, so in addition to that, it talks about how you can synchronize across your servers, perform correlations. So these are the activities or the things that you need to make sure to incorporate when you are analyzing incidents. I put down some questions for lesson learned. It's always good to ask yourself these questions. Exactly what happened and at how many times, right? How well did the staff manage the performance? So post, it's really hindsight. We have to look at what's happened, what had happened, and how we can do better. Here's evidence retention. So we know that because of legal requirement, we have to retain the evidence for a while. If it is federally related, if it relates to cybercrime, you have to report to FBI. So for example, someone is trying to breach your network and, you know, maybe some data is lost, right? We have to do the evaluation in that and then provide that information to the FBI, and they will further investigate. So if the incident is civil litigation or criminal prosecution, you should talk to the legal team before you throw away the evidence, even if it's years, because it might come back, right? The likelihood, if there's no likelihood that the evidence is going to be used in court, and if the company doesn't care for it, it can be discarded. So make sure you check with your internal practices and also your legal requirements. Okay, so in the document, you will find this template and the SANS template. There are many templates that are available for incidents response plan, incidents response document. But these are the priority things that these are the main components of the incident response. Okay. For if you go through your bachelor program, they will likely make you write an IRP, master program, and even doctorate program, right? In security, we are all about writing and implementing policies, writing and implementing plan and procedures for our organization in the technical area. So you need to have a statement for the management commitment because they play a role in decision making, purpose and objective, scope of the policy for incident response. Because without it, you might sidetrack. And then the type of incidents and how to handle each type. Performance measure for the team, structure and roles, even the active people you would list and their name, contact information, and responsibility. So your job might be going in, evaluate the company, and then be able to write the incident response. So I had an intern that had worked for a company when we were helping them building out some policies. They were being attacked. So this company built black box for planes. They're actually really important, and they contracted with the Department of Defense. And so it's such a small company. You would think that that type of organization is very large. They only had one person that manages all their IT stuff, right? So they had hired one of my former interns to be able to do that. And as we were writing the policy, they had an incident, so we had to go in and build out incidents response. They didn't know what to do. Like, after they were breached, they didn't know what to do. You would think that, like, having that kind of business, they would know to contact, like, enforcement and all of these things. They didn't know what to do. So you'd be surprised. You would think that a lot of people nowadays are more aware of security incident or cybersecurity, right? But a lot of companies don't know what to do and what to handle. Okay. So if it's court related, we need to make sure it's retained. Okay. For a while. It could be longer than what your trial period would be. The indicators that's used to detect security event, we already talked about that. Intrusion prevention system alerts, intrusion detection system alert, your SIEM information, which is your security management system information. Usually that comes also in the form of alert or notification or warning or flags. Your security software, like, if you guys are using a certain security application on your system, normally it functions as many different things, right? Your host firewall and other things too. So it would also give you alert. Integrity file checker. So it basically looked at files that are being modified. This is important because when attackers are corrupting files, right, that would lose integrity. When malware particularly likes to impact system files, so integrity checker is essential, and that usually just revert to how the hash was created compared to the hash that exists now. Right. Then we have a third party monitoring service. Some company would pay an organization like Palo Alto or a security organization to monitor. Or in the case if we're using cloud infrastructure, right? AWS, Azure, those type of environment would have a third monitoring type of service. And of course, logs, system logs, events, logs. Logs are critical. And your threat knowledge base. So that will be your public domain information on your threats. So where do I go? I can go to Mitre attack, right? There are many. I can go to some of the databases on threats, and we talked about that before, to be able to obtain additional information. If you run across something that's more rare, you might need to take a little bit of time for researching. So when you're writing a logging policy, how we should maintain our logs, we need to include information on the log services, the applications, because those are also logged, network devices, such as your routers, switches, security appliance, those keep logs. Also, where the logs are gonna be stored and backed up, how long the logs are gonna stay in storage. So your log retention, your log storage. And with that, we also need to talk about like how much log we're gonna store, right? Like in gigabytes, terabytes, and so on. So logging policy is important. These are the rules that we are going to use when we refer to log maintenance and management. So your logs need to be backed up. right? Because an attacker can go in and modify your log. So if you don't have it backed up, then the integrity of your log is jeopardized. Question. Okay. So I put down a screenshot of your checklist for the type of actions that you would need to perform for security incidents. And then you can also refer to NIST documentation, how to form your team for security incidents. You know, you can easily make over $100,000 doing security incidents. That's basically the world of security, right? You can work remotely also, or there. Just need the initial experience. But this is, you know, this is intense. So if you're working for a company, let's say a security company, right? Like they would pay you as a analyst or a specialist over $100,000, you're gonna be handling incidents all the time. Okay. And that can be difficult, stressful sometimes, but you know, with the peak, if you enjoy that, then you know, you can look for those type of work. So I put down some of the roles that you would see in the team. And then your incident response provider, these are the organization that would, the firm, the security firm that will be able to help. Okay, it talks about how you should outline your scope and making sure that you have appropriate control, especially when it relates to enforcement, law enforcement. So how can we make sure that our incident response plan is effective? You gotta test it. So just like fire drill or earthquake drill, right? We have to simulate it. So companies pay good amount of money for security people to do this, right? Set up an environment where their IT team wouldn't know that they are going through a fake incident, but to simulate a real incident. This is really popular nowadays, right? So you would then set it up, right? Release some ransomware in there and see if how they're responding to it. And then we would rank them based on how good they are responding to it, right? How prepared you are, right? Like you have, if at home, if you have an emergency plan, it's the same thing as an emergency plan for the company in the area of IT. And then how good are they communicating with each other and then to the outside, like their vendor, their partners, law enforcement, and so on. I just looked at, I helped one of the clients, I just looked at a plan that had a simulation practice built in from a company and how much it costs and doing an evaluation for that particular client, right? Because they asked me if it's worth it. So, you know, looking at like what they're targeting and so on, pretty interesting. Okay, so your vendors, your partners are really important as well for communication. Okay, this is important for analysts. We need to make sure that we know threat classification. Okay, so for 6, it asks you, when responding to a network security incident, what should you do? Whenever it's network related, network capture is a must. So that means that your network would be constantly being monitored, right? Being recorded, like putting a camera on your network and evaluate the packets, so recording the packets that are being passed by. So as soon as that incident is, you know that you're getting that alert, you need to create a capture. We can use Wireshark for that. You can use Network Miner. Network Miner is really good for investigation, but Wireshark is probably decent because it gives you the visualization of who's talking what kind of conversation and so on. So capture the network traffic. Even if you have suspicion, capture. So that way you can detect what it is that you're looking at and analyze it and fix it. So that's going to lead to detection and analysis, which gives you the details about the intention of the attack, the scope of the attack sometimes, and the activities. So if they're brute forcing you via the network, then you should be able to see that, right? If they're doing denial of service attack, then you should be able to see that. You're going to get the traffic. If they're spoofing IP, even with that, you're going to get a flood of traffic because it's DOS. If they're brute forcing, you would see enumeration cycle. So continuous from that same system submitting the request to log in, and they automate that. So it's going to plug in the username and password, failed attempt. So if your account lockout policy isn't working, then go change that. Okay? Because you're being brute force. Any question? All right, good. So threat classification goes over how we treat USBs, right? Removable media, external drives, micro SD, even bring your own devices to work. How do we treat that? Attrition, looking at, using brute force to test your organization to see how effective they are, with, password policy and so on. But as an attacker, they're going to try to obtain credential, and I mentioned this to my CIS47 class because we did brute force this week. Brute force is not a fast process, okay? And it's usually detectable. So, pass the hash is probably the way to go compared to doing brute force, because brute force, you can get locked down pretty quick as an attacker. Okay, so attrition is important, and then looking at web. Web is important because it is public facing. It is prone to be the target. So if you have web-based application, most companies do. If you're using like a login screen to log in to buy something, to pay for something, to access your account, whatever, that's a web app. So credential could be lost. Exploitation could be through the browser, right? Man in the browser. There's tons of different attacks that we've learned. And the vulnerability. Email is also another area that we have to look at how malicious entity can come in via ransomware or malware attachments and phishing, so many things. Okay, so these are some of the things that look at threats and how the threats can impact your operations or your critical systems. Let me move 6 down in case you're still working with that. All right, let's talk about 7. So what type of information should be included in your lesson learned document? This is the post-incident response, right? You need to put the type of incident that happened, the time, and we always put down UTC, not like Pacific Standard or whatever, right? UTC, because it is universal. It's not to the region. And your system is designed to record UTC. Even if it's not, we convert it. That's for all, that's for forensic, and this, we have to use universal time. And then we have to put down the response level of the team, right? Were they responding something that's critical? Because sometimes they might dispatch the entire team, or, several people from the team if it's not as critical. And then what kind of procedures were used for the recovery process. So for example, if I have data loss, then I have to make sure that I contain the leak of data. Then I have to recover the data, either rebuild the same amount, the data, like have, for example, if it's like accounting data, you have to go back to your old backup and be able to pull that. If it's not there, then you have to go through paper records and be able to have data entry and all the manual stuff. Okay. So but with that, you have to identify or list or describe the procedures that for your recovery. And then we would assess the communication. Was it very effective? Everybody responded immediately, you know, because we have to use a certain type of communication channel, right? Like some company, they will use like Slack or whatever. Or even smartphone or email, text messages. And then we would note the improvement areas. So the improvement area is a little bit harder to kind of expand if you're only looking at from the lens of IT. You have to talk to the team members, and then you have to talk to the people that would be involved, so that way they can tell you, oh, maybe next time we could do this, right? And then if you have anything new, that's going to help you for the future detection. So you want to put down indicators. That's the whole point in reporting incident response and documenting incident response, is to make sure that everybody else is aware of it and how we can detect it faster and stop it quicker. And then corrective actions for the future prevention. As you know, anytime that it's first time for something, it's always going to be tedious, slow, and cumbersome, right? Sometimes very difficult. But with that, we learn something and we would improve. And in the future, we would be faster in responding. We would see it right away, right? You know that. Personally, as human, we all go through that. Right? The first time you do something, it's always going to be a little slower and a little harder. But as you learn from it, you are going to be better the next time. So we will put down the indicator and corrective actions for future prevention. And what else we can do to prevent it from happening, period. And then the resources and tools for future detection. So instead of researching it as we go, which takes a lot of time, if you already have the tools in place, it's much better, right? But it doesn't mean that the future incident could be similar, but a little different, but at least you would have the basic tools that you need to address it. This is why I keep telling everyone, right? If you want to do incident response, build out your tool belt. Making sure as you go, as you learn things, as you practice, you make note of the tools, and you would, like, these sets of tools are going to be for web application. These sets of tools are going to be for, you know, brute forcing, and so on and so on. And monitoring and malware investigation, different things. And then you can write your own scripts and tool, right? So as you become more professional in the field, you are more equipped. Just like how, you know, if you're looking at mechanics, their tool carts is more quality tools and more tools, right? So it's the same thing in the IT area. Question. So how long should the organization retain the evidence? We touched on this earlier with a similar question. As long as there's legal requirement, right? Or internal requirement. When should it be discarded? So before we dispose all of evidence, like your network capture, delete the file, and so on, we want to make sure that we check. We check with the legal team, and we check with the business operation team, your COO. and your CIO. It's always good to talk to the chief information officer or your CSO. Sometimes they have the CSO, but normally you see CIO overlook security as well. Questions? We already saw this part from the notes from before, right? So I'll move that down. So you can grab that from the notes if you want, but you can also type it out. Your IRP, your incident response plan, you need to have statement of management commitment, how much they will support incident response, because sometimes that can be money, a lot of money. A lot of human hours, a lot of equipment, and so on. Time. We would list the purpose of our incident response, the objectives of the policy, the objective of the rules for incident response. We would define different types of incidents like malware, data breach. And then in malware, you have to be specific, okay? Trojan, we do this. Ransomware, we would do this. So you have to define those and then all the technical terminology. But we need, when it says the incident definition, basically you have to say what that is and then how you handle those. That's your plan. It's like having an emergency plan at home in case of fire. You would use a fire extinguisher, right? Water hose, so on, right? It depends on the type of fire. If it's chemical fire, we would do this. If it's, so, or if it's earthquake, how do you evacuate? So we would have some kind of emergency plan for the organization in the technical area this way. How do we respond to attack? How do we respond to malware? And then we would specify the rating, the ranking of how critical that is, how we should prioritize it. So if it's level 5 is highly critical, that gets addressed first compared to level 3, which is not as critical. If it's medium, then that would be addressed after. Okay. Then we talked about performance measurement for the team. I think now, bless you, I think now it's always good to do like a survey or feedback type of poll at the end for the overall organization and then also the team itself. Like I always feel like it's always good to do a self-reflection. I make my student do this for their project only because looking back, you can always say, hey, I could have done that a little better. Maybe I can manage my time a little better. I can start my project sooner. Or, same thing with incident response. I could have blah, 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 right? So having that assessment is important after. I think the next to the last 2 bullets, right? The reporting and contact forms, these are really important. I think a lot of the alerts and things, we rely on the system itself, but I think a lot of the human behavior based type of attack, for example, like physical attack, like someone is entering your building and cutting cables, for example. That happened before too. Like people just cut a bunch of fiber optic cable and that took out the whole nation internet for almost 24 hours. Believe it or not, right? So Cox Charter, those type of company, someone went into the manhole and just cut fiber optic cable. And like it wiped out first the East Coast, then the West Coast, and then nobody was getting internet that day. You know how much money that's lost just doing that, right? But if there's a way that someone can report it, just like how people would call the police when they see drunk drivers, you see those signs all the time. That's just a notification to the people, say, hey, you could do this. You can let us know that someone is breaking the law, right? The same thing with the IT people. We would then tell the overall users that if you do see something, right, you can contact us this way. You can report this way. Simply send a chat with a code or whatever. So we understand the difference between procedures and policy, right? Procedures are step by step instruction to follow, just like how I wrote lab procedure for you guys to do step by step instructions, where policies are rules for the people to abide. Okay. So what we can do in a lot of the organization, they would refer to this as having playbooks. So playbooks are generally just containing the important elements of how to respond to incidents, your procedures for specific incidents. Just like if you're looking at football or sports, right? They have playbook for certain type of, you know, approach in football. The coach would have that. So then you would see the same thing in security. We would handle an incident a certain way. And that is going to allow us to be more effective and more efficient in responding to incidents. So having that documentation is really important, and then you can also look into, you know, be more proactive about improvement. I think security, if everyone is a lot more proactive than reactive, it wouldn't be such a need for it. Will we get there? Maybe after my lifetime, perhaps. I don't think that we will get there simply because I think it's just costly, and then, you know, there's innovative ways to get around things, so security is always changing. Are we okay? Any questions? So if you need to write security incidents response plan, I would suggest using a template that's available online. You can find like NIST or SANS or something that would be, and a lot of them are very general. So you have to customize it to the need for the business, the procedures, the people, and so on, right? It does take a little bit of time to put it together. And you have to take a look at like the data, the system, all of that information as we mentioned earlier. Okay, so I'm gonna move 10 down to the next part. So in the notes, they already give you some information about the members for the security incident response team. You would include the managers. Those are going to be the people who help you with decision making or authoritative actions. Technical subject matter experts. In the larger corporations, you see these PhDs and people who are well experienced in some area. So for example, there might be an engineer, a security engineer that specializes in malware, right? So if you look at companies like FireEye, Imperva, security company that are contracting for service, they might have specific experts for different areas. And it makes them experts for a reason, is because they might have extensive experience in it and knowledge in it. So that way you can refer to. But in some scale, if you're looking at the smaller business or businesses that don't have those roles, they can refer to a third party service for that, right? Like Palo Alto or even Cisco. Then you have the IT support staff that's going to carry out your response action in the technical area. Then you have attorneys or legal counsel. This is to make sure that we have compliance. And some of that too is, so they're going to advise you on what to do as far as law enforcement, if we should contact law enforcement, if we should go for public relation, PR, right? This is why sometimes it's delayed, is because of the legal aspect of it. Is that they want to make sure, because they have to take a look at how that would impact the business in revenue loss and so on. And then you also need to have HR individual to coordinate communication, because HR has access to people's contact information and also PR related stuff, public relations. And then you would have team leader or designated leader to really direct the effort. It doesn't necessarily have to be a CIO or IT manager. It could be a security engineer or someone that would be able to manage the team. And then communicate with management. You have to do regular updates with them. So if you're looking at something like from Caesar Palace last time, right? You get a lot of feed. As you look at the media, they have like hourly updates through social media. That means that they also update management, and then their public relation release some of that information regularly to the public. So that way they can maintain somewhat of a decent image for the business, right? Like, we are taking care of it. We're not just letting it sit there, even though, and then you have like all of these perspective from outside of the company, even security people or not, they're gonna give their perspective on how things should be handled. So you probably better off addressing it with your own public relation team, and then be able to control a lot of the damage with the wildfire, right? Security incident, that scope is always causing some kind of negative impact on the business regardless, so. So what should be included in the scope of the security incident response plan? We should say who authorizes the activation, right? Even if, let's say that you are the specialist that sees the alert, right? And you would notify your manager, and your manager would notify the CSIRT leader. They, because of the plan, it would say when you should activate. It's like, when do we go into the state of emergency, right? As a nation. It's exactly that. Hello. So we would say who that person is that's going to activate the team for incident response. All the department responsibility, the employees in the team, and then external communication with law enforcement, even also like you would list maybe if it's local police, their contact information. And then, or if it's FBI, sometimes we have to refer to FBI if it's federally related. And regulatory bodies. So compliance, like for HIPAA. And then we have internal communication. And then what kind of trigger that would escalate responsibility. So that means that it's simply this, right? If it's at this scope, this group of people handle it, but if it's out of their league, then the next group of people would handle it in the team, right? Like, just like when you call tech support to solve a problem, and they're like, I'm sorry, I can't help you, I'm gonna forward you to my manager, my supervisor, who's gonna be able to give you a little bit more support, right? So that type of trigger, then those trigger needs to be listed and identified or noted. We already talked about testing. So testing, the incident response plan is gonna make sure that it is functioning properly, right? Imagine that you have a fire extinguisher to prepare in the case if there's fire. You never test the extinguisher and the fire breaks out and then your equipment fails. So if you don't test, you won't know if things are gonna be successful or not. That's gonna be 50-50 chance, which is, if there's a lot of money that will get placed into this, we better test, and we need to test more regularly than once a year, right? So you have to have a simulation. You also have to have, maybe you can also test with the simulated environment, like I said before, set up, virtual machines and be able to simulate an attack and see how people respond, and then how your team respond. That way you can know what you need to do as far as training or prepare the people. Now, insurance will require that you have IRP if you have cybersecurity insurance, just like how you have property insurance, right? They would require that you have all the measures to prevent fire and other things. Same thing. And then, for a business like this, if they don't have fire drill, potentially that will impact their insurance. So you have to do a drill for security as well. But that provides us with a lot of opportunity. I see all the jobs in this area, right? You can be part of the team. You can also write the plan. You can, build the simulation. There's so many different things that we can do as security professional being part of IRP. Most of the jobs fall here, you know that. You're the firefighter of the security world. Okay. So the entity that are involved in external communication when there is a security incident likely will be law enforcement, your partners. So could be companies joining another company as partners. So the partners in the organization, vendors, people you're buying products from, especially when you're looking at like retail, like department store based, like Walmart, they would have many different vendors. And those vendors have access to some part of their system for inventory purposes, for sales purposes, like account payable, and so on, right? Because for purchase order, affiliated organizations, and then you got the media and public. Those are external. Media would be like news press, social media based type of feed.
So how do we know the scale or how large is the impact when you're responding to security incident? It really comes down to the degree of impairment that costs the organization. So if they're completely dead, like if you're looking at Caesar Palace, right? A lot of the things were wiped out. Even the casino machines were done. Like they were not working. Okay? That's severity and impairment. But then you might have some incident that would only be a fraction of that. So you would look at the degree of impairment that caused the organization to recover from an incident. So the first part for Caesar Palace was when they recovered their website because they have a lot of hotel booking and things like that being done. But because they have partners, you know, the group itself, right? It was being attacked, not just Caesar Palace. It was other related hotels through that network. So incident is responding to the larger group, not just Caesar Palace. Their situation was the most severe compared to their partners. Or, you know, it's still the same company, it's just different entity. So how bad is it from recovery is what's going to determine the scope of impact. And you can give it score based. I think there are a lot of matrix that allows you to rank it by score, like by points. Or you can qualify it by levels. So what is used to determine the functional part of the functional impact in the security incident? Let me move this up a tiny bit. So the determinant for the functional impact is really depending on the data, the system, and the processes that were affected by the incident. If the majority of the data is corrupted or impacted, then it is a severe functional impact. And then also how the organization's able to continue after the incident. If they're able to keep on going while the incident is happening, then your functional impact might not be as severe, right? Most companies dream to be like that. They want to be like that. That in the case that if they're being attacked, they're not down. They're still available. They're still going. This is why you see data center all over the world. You don't know if Meta or formerly Facebook is being attacked over the years. I'm sure they have. But you see seamless, right? There's a lot of resources that's going to be poured into that just to make sure that the world go round all the time for these people. But in the back, from security standpoint, you know that it's being impacted. So there's, you know, to be seamless like that, you have to be prepared and you have to have the money, the resources, stuff that you need. Ultimately, that's the game, right? Which system can last longer? Performance. Ultimately, I think it's a lot of the attacks is to floor your performance, storage and processing power. Okay, so you have to, when you come across breaches, you have to classify the breach. And the breaches is associated with your data classes. And their impact level. So when you have breach for confidential data or highly sensitive data, that will be its breach classification. So it's directly related to the class of data or data classification. And then how severe is it, right? We just touched on that before. So similarly, you would see whether it's functional impact or operational impact. It might seem very high level concept, but it is very logical. If you think about it, right? Like you have to say, okay, well, when a breach happens, what is it really for? Right? It's really for data. And so you would see that, oh, if they're going for the highly sensitive data, that's the level of breach that I'm looking at. And then the scale of that is, if they make it where it's you cannot even respond and your system is not even respond, then it's highly severe. So when you come across incident, you just have to be logical in your thinking. Okay? You have to really think about the perspective of the attacker in the case of an attack, the goals behind it, and logically think it through. Because that's what when you respond to an incident, you're solving a problem. And when you solve the problem accordingly is when you're logical with your reasoning. Any questions? So here I showed you this is an example. You don't have to follow it this way. There are different ways, but this is a category or a qualification of your functional impact. I like point-based better, or I like numbers better because it really distinguishes it clearer to me. When you quantify things, something like 5 to 7 can be drastically different compared to if you just have low, medium, or high. Because medium could be a 5, right? And then, but a 6 is also a medium. So it's kind of lumping everybody up. But if you are more clear, so if you use this type of category, you should give it some kind of numerical values. Okay, that is fair. So that way it is distinguishable, because if you classify only 3, or if you categorize only 3, you can't say low, medium, or medium high, right? Because then what does that mean? But if you say low medium is equal to a 4, right? And a medium is a 5, and then a medium high is a 6. So it makes clearer sense to the people who are going through and identifying and analyzing the incidents. Okay. So these are some of the things that you come across as categories for breach classification. Information, intellectual property, that's big, right? Like if you're looking at things like unique design that's owned by a company, that's their intellectual property. And that can also fall into confidential things because that's what they are protecting for their business. That's the critical area to make money. Okay, let's take a break if you need a break. Let me stop the recording. And then I'll start it again.